Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us here today. A warm welcome to you all for today's special presentation, Pre-Seed to Series Funding, Leveraging Opportunities in ASEAN. This event is being held in conjunction with the West Tech Festival and is hosted by AsiaLink Business in partnership with the City of Perth. So we have quite a few speakers today and time is fixed, so we'll get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, to get us started, we're honoured to welcome our first speaker, Lord Mayor Basil Simpelis from the City of Perth.
Lee, thank you very much, and a very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into one of the glorious parts of the City of Perth, the Perth Town Hall. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome you all here, and I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia. To all of the delegates, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing us your commitment and showing the opportunities that exist in our city, the great passion and commitment you have done. And can I extend my thanks on that score to Councillor Brent Fleeton, who joins us here today, who's been a very passionate advocate for not only our engagement with Asia, but also our engagement with the business community. And a personal vote of thanks to Councillor Fleeton for not only his great work and advocacy, but also for being here in support today. We are really excited to be hosting today's Pre-Seed to Series Funding, Leveraging Opportunities in ASEAN, in partnership with AsiaLink Business, and as one of the first events of this year's West Tech Fest. And really, in many ways, this kicks off the city's involvement with West Tech Fest for 2022. The City of Perth, I'm delighted to be able to say, is a long-time partner of the West Tech Fest. We've supported the event from its origins and inception through to the grand showcase that it is now, and that support has been both financial and in all of the other ways that the City of Perth is able to support great events that come to our city. Of course, we're always looking to showcase our city, opportunities, tangible benefits, and bring more and more people into the City of Perth, the business community and our visitors as well. And I'm delighted to be able to say that we've just come off our busiest nighttime week of the year, the Friday, Saturday and Sunday period, which began effectively on Monday of last week and concluded on Sunday yesterday, culminated in that 7-day period being the busiest nighttime week of the year. Our Hawkers Market in the Forest Place, along with our turning on of the GPO lights as part of the Rio Tinto Christmas Lights Trail, was enormous on Friday night. Saturday night, the Alinta Energy Christmas pageant saw record crowds through the City of Perth and right down St George's Terrace. And on Sunday morning, absolutely thrilled that the City of Perth at the Northridge Piazza was able to provide the location for our Socceroos versus Argentina live site. We are in the people business. We want people to be in our city 24/7. And I'm delighted that we are making significant inroads on that score and on all measures in bringing people into the city. And I should add that our partnerships, which include this year with Roy Hill for our nighttime drone series over the summer months and with Rio Tinto for the Christmas Lights Trail, demonstrates how business is now open to doing business with the City of Perth. And we are able to explore opportunities with the business community that previously the City of Perth has not been as readily able to connect. And I'm absolutely thrilled of the progress made in that area. But back to West Tech Fest, and what a great event it has been since its inception. Shines a light, like we do, on innovation, investment and entrepreneurship in Western Australia. And what better place than the City of Perth, our City of Light, to host today's event. As you all know, the West Tech Fest has gone from strength to strength over the past decade, and we are very happy to be welcoming visitors from around Australia and the world back to Perth to experience it. And obviously, forging stronger connections with the Asian business community is a lot of what we are about. I've said it many, many times. But our geographic location has us magnificently located to be able to capitalise on the opportunities that exist with being in the same time zone as 60% of the world's population. We have been blessed, and it is our job to work together to capitalise on those opportunities. Perth innovators and entrepreneurs are, by extension, ideally positioned to access the opportunities that exist in ASEAN, owing to our shared time zone, as I've mentioned, the short flights to the major cities and the existing government, personal and commercial linkages which exist. And building upon these connections, which exist with our closest neighbours and major trading partners, benefits not only individuals, but the broader ecosystem in WA and ASEAN. I have had the pleasure of speaking at a number of events in the last 6 months which have been focused specifically on this, and that is to deal with and focus on business development, innovation, collaboration and supporting our entrepreneurial community. This has included a range of groups, including school kids at the IDEA Academy, which is located here in the city, inspiring to see the next generation already working on the ideas of the future. And I was also honoured just a few weeks ago to accept the Australian Institute of Management, WA's Pinnacle Award for Asian Engagement Excellence. That was in our city only last month. The City of Perth is proud to be a leading local government area in this space, and our work with Asian businesses has played an important role in our success. And I'm always thrilled to hear that in many ways we are a standout, and Lee's comments to me as I entered the room that the City of Perth has outperformed in this area is very gratifying to hear. And I acknowledge Daniel High and his team from our Economic Development Department who have done such great work in this area and continue to forge wonderful relations. I suppose the message I really want to leave you with here today is that Perth is the perfect place for international investment. We have so many international companies established here, but also working across borders. And as the main hub for startups, scale-ups, co-working spaces, and so on in Western Australia, the city is dedicated to supporting the growth of innovative entrepreneurs and being a leading local government in this area. And I see many of you in the audience today who I've had the pleasure of coming to visit. I've seen the businesses that you have been involved with grow. I've seen the working spaces where you foster great businesses and ideas grow. And I thank you for your commitment in this area. It helps our city, it helps our community, and it really does help our state. We're especially excited to see the space-cubed landing pad get underway. The ambitions and goals of the landing pad match up very well with what we're trying to achieve here today, connecting Perth with the world. And we want our creative, innovative, brightest and best people to set up shop here and then expand internationally, looking to ASEAN for development and growth. So I do thank you for being here. Thank you for your great commitment. Perth is known as the City of Light. We were given that name by a NASA astronaut because 60 years ago we stood out, even from space. 60 years on, those ideals, that name that we were given by John Glenn, NASA astronaut, for having the courage and commitment to come together, to shine a light, to say that we are connected and that we are with you wherever you might be, those ideals and principles still drive the City of Perth. I hope that you can play your part. I thank you for being here today, and I can tell you that for our business and startup community and for our friends in the Asian region, the light is always on in our City of Perth, your City of Light. Thank you everyone and have a great day.
I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel, and if I can invite our in-person panellists to come up on the stage and join me. Our speakers today consist of two local Perth-based business people that have sought funding and worked in the ASEAN region. We also have guests from Singapore and Vietnam from both the public and private sectors joining us. So Neil Cross, Neil, if you'd like to come up. Neil is a globally recognised startup entrepreneur in blue chip technology, finance and data. He's the co-founder and chairman of Picture Wealth and non-executive director at Peppermint Innovation. Joining us next, we have Roy Mellon. Sorry. Joining us next, we have Roy Mellon. Roy, apologies for the stairs. Roy is the founder of Definitive Group, now a global payroll company that received its Series A funding from Singapore. Welcome, Roy. Round of applause for Roy. Please, gentlemen, take your seats. And joining us online, assuming the technology is all with us, we have Betty Sun Lucas joining us from Singapore. Betty is the Specialist FinTech Director at Austrade. She has over 18 years of experience in building and growing corporate innovation capability and works with the Austrade landing pad in Singapore. We also have Tien Nguyen, General Partner for Earth Venture Capital, a global venture capital fund that aims to empower tech startups with solutions to prevent climate change. And finally, we have Lisa Soledre. Lisa is General Partner at R3I Capital and the pioneer behind the global scale-up platforms, the House of MedTech and the House of Deep Tech. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give another round of applause for our panellists? So I'm going to do my best to engage with the panellists in the room as well as the heads on the screen behind us. I'm going to invite each speaker to take a couple of minutes to tell us about their experience, perhaps expand on the very short bios that I provided just now, and also tell us about their experience with ASEAN and perhaps what they're currently working on with regards to the region. So, Neil, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Yes. Oh, I sound so much sexier with the mic, even if I do say so myself. So I'm Neil Cross. I've been, I suppose, doing business in the ASEAN region probably for about 12 years now. And so my first job, actually, I was working in Sydney for Microsoft, and I got promoted to run the Microsoft insurance and banking business for Asia, which is about north of $1 billion a year sales business. And after that, so I spent a lot of time, obviously, going around Asia, ASEAN, talking to banks, insurers, cap markets, getting used to the culture, understand how things work. And then I ran MasterCard Innovation Labs for Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And then I was the Chief Innovation Officer at the biggest company in Southeast Asia called DBS Bank. And we built a bank in India, and we built a bank in Indonesia. Then after that, I worked for the family behind Jardine Matheson, Lord Keswick, and helped unify 8 finance companies in Indonesia. And that's called Moxa. It's going very well now. They've got a unified offering, and I think they're up to 5 million downloads. At the same time, I built 2 small hotels in Sumatra, one with the orangutans called hotelerangutan.com, $25 a night. And I bought an endangered coral reef just before COVID and built a start of a dive resort up on a remote island like you do. And I do a lot of business in ASEAN, doing public speaking, consultancy. I'm currently advising banks across the region as well. So that's, I think, pretty much it for ASEAN.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Neil. Roy, same question to you.
Yeah, so my journey was a little bit different. Straight out of high school, I joined the military, drove tanks, and then I ended up building a quite successful payroll workforce management tech company. Through my journey, coming from the military back into civvy life, worked for the big corporates here in WA, learnt, I guess, my trade, which was payroll, once I injured myself. And then from there, went into business in 2009. I built my first business and sold that 2 years later to a global provider out of Aberdeen in Scotland. Did a reverse acquisition 2 years later and bought out their Australian division. And then that's when I went into tech and I really needed to control my destiny. Thought tech was only going to cost me $100K to build it. $15 million later, we launched, right? So my P&L wasn't great at that point in time, but what a wonderful journey I had, because we had the skill sets behind us and then we had the technology to beautifully complement. Going through my first capital raise was through a Singapore GK Go's family, and it was through Boardroom, one of his entities, both in Singapore and Australia, which did unlisted and company secretarial work. They're one of the top 3 in Asia Pac. And that was my gateway into Asia. So having their backing, having their footprint allowed me to really access that region, and having the financial backing. To ultimately, August last year, I was acquired. Again, take 2. but this is it. I was very lucky with the acquisition to be acquired by the UK largest tech company called the Access Group, and now I'm the Managing Director for the payroll definitive product that I built from the ground up. So it's pretty exciting. So there's 5,500 of us now across the globe. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Roy. Welcome. We'll go online, and I'm actually going to go to Lisa first, because Lisa was originally due to join us when she was based in Singapore at a very decent hour of the day. But Lisa, I'm not mistaken, you're currently in Luxembourg. So I think it's about 2 a.m. there or something like that. So thank you so much for either staying up or getting up early to join us. But Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment and your relationship with Southeast Asia?
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's 6 a.m. Here in Luxembourg, so not too early in the morning. I have been in Southeast Asia for the last 26 years, just showing my age. I was born in Queensland, joined the military, much like one of our stage members here. And when I got out of the army, I floated my first company on the Australian Stock Exchange and was then in a life of tech entrepreneurship. I've had the privilege of building and scaling companies globally and having 3 exits. And today I serve Australian founders all over the world through our hubs in Singapore, Luxembourg, and in 2023 in Dallas, Texas, where we've built a metaverse that scales our deep tech companies and our med tech companies into region. So I'm proud and privileged to work with Betty San Lucas and the team at Austrade to land and expand our companies across the region. And I have the privilege to teach at Singapore Management University, where for the last decade, I've been helping the smart nation digitally transform.
Excellent, thank you. And Betty, I think that's your opening, so over to you.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Hi, I'm Betty San Lucas. I'm from Austrade. So I understand that everybody just have your lunch. So maybe before I start, just a quick question. How many of you do not know Austrade? Raise your hand. Oops, we got 1, 2. Okay.
Everyone knows Austrade, Betty.
Two people who raise your hand. Austrade, we're an Australian government agency. So we help Australian companies to connect to the world. We have over 83 offices around the world, and many people like you, like me, in the onshore market, help the Australian companies to grow. At the same time, I also take the role as the in charge of the investments from Singapore. So I help the Singapore companies expanding into Australia by making meaningful investment into Australia. And lastly, I am also the FinTech Specialist Director in Singapore office. So that means that basically I run programs in the FinTech space, which is part of the landing pad. Thanks very much.
Excellent, thanks, Betty. And last but not least, Tien, hello.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And my name is Tien Nguyen, and I am originally from Vietnam. I used to, most of my career is in Ireland, the Republic. And I went there because of the scholarship by the Irish government. And then I managed fund there as a general partner, a VC fund. And so we managed to invest in renewable energies in the North Sea, and also wave energy and related sustainability, and also project in Europe and also the East Coast of America. I just returned to Vietnam before the pandemic, realized that I need to do something for my original country. And it's turned out that choosing something related to climate change and also using my expertise in investment, it's turned out that we opened Earth VC, Earth Venture Capital, where we focus on the climate tech startup. And currently, we invest with the emphasis of Southeast Asian country, but also we hope to find some deals in Australia, because in my opinion, this region, Asia Pacific, is the frontliner in terms of the war against climate change. And we realize that in the frontliner country, we can see that the effect of climate change is really obvious. So it's turned out that we need to start here other than anywhere else in the world to fight this war. Some fun facts about me is I am the heavy metal guitarist, and I'm listening to AC/DC. So thanks to Australian, you got good band.
I'm sure there's a few fans in the room, Tien. So I'll come back into the room and start with Neil and Roy in terms of some questions. I guess what I want to do at the start of this discussion is get a sense of what it's like for business people going into Southeast Asia, so speaking to that part of our audience, and then perhaps moving online in terms of fundraising and going into market and things like that as well. But Neil, you've got such a breadth of experience over many years, many businesses, multiple locations, all these types of things. Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing in Southeast Asia now, sort of where it's heading, how you'd characterise the region now for perhaps business people in the room who are thinking about venturing into that part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive market, yeah, it's absolutely huge, and a lot of diversity. You can't really treat it as one market. Obviously, at the more developed end, you've got Singapore, Malaysia, and then then for me, you've got the next tier, which is like Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and then it kind of, falls away to the smaller geographies in terms of kind of growth in the startup community. What's really interesting this year, finally, is that Singapore has been overtaken for startup funding. Indonesia is now number one in Southeast Asia. And Indonesia, for me, is the new China, yeah? It is getting a bit overcooked. So if you're looking for more white space in a domestic market, I'd go for Vietnam. Depends what your business is, yeah, or the Philippines. Thailand isn't attracting a lot of startup funding. It's struggling a bit in the startup space. It's not getting as much money. All up, I think there was like 25 billion came into Southeast Asia. What you're seeing, though, is really interesting things happening. For example, the e-commerce capability is 10 times better in Indonesia than it is in Australia. I can be in a little jungle town and get stuff quicker delivered than I can living in the city of Perth. No offence to Baz and the team. It's not their fault, it's Amazon. Can you believe that? Yeah, and so they're actually accelerating into the future a lot faster. And so if you look at the different markets, you've got to think, for a company from Australia, where you're going to beachhead and how you're going to beachhead. And there's different models to beachhead. So are you going to go, for example, join an accelerator or a startup boot camp in one of these countries? Most importantly, you've got to pick your country. What product are you in? If you're B2B, you can have an excuse for going to Singapore. If you like to pay low corporate and income tax, Singapore's great as well. But it's a tiny market. You wouldn't go there with a B2C offering. And in Singapore, there's like 3 startups to every citizen. It's really, really overcooked. But there is a lot of finance there. So if you look at Singapore's GDP is 50% bigger than WA's. Singapore's startup budget is over $1 billion a year, the government. WA's is about 4 million. It's 500 times bigger, and yet their GDP is only 50% bigger. But there's a little fact for you. So you've got to decide where you're going to go, how you're going to beachhead. So you're going to go join a government program, or you're going to do a joint venture with a local entity. What sort of entity is that? If you look across Southeast Asia, a lot of the countries tend to have big family conglomerates, own significant stacks of the infrastructure in that country, yeah? So they might own all the shopping malls, they might own all the petrol stations, they might have bank interests. And so there's these big kind of family structures across Southeast Asia. If you can get a partnership in there, that's going to be incredibly useful. You've got to think about how you get distribution. You've got to think about how you get stuff done. Most importantly, you've got to find someone you trust, yeah, to do business with. That's the most important thing. Other ways to beachhead, there's a lot of expats floating around in these countries who do professional beachheading. That means you basically give them your product, give them your slide decks, and for a fee they'll go and get you clients. So they'll be your kind of satellite office, and they'll get you your first client in country. So if you're a B2B player, that's incredibly useful as well. But I think the most important thing is you've got to work out which of the Southeast Asian countries you're a fit in. They're all moving at different speeds, yeah? Like Philippines, in terms of digital and startups, behind Indonesia. Indonesia, there's still some white space, but there's huge conglomerates now that are going into all areas of kind of into the C space. People like GoTo, so the biggest e-commerce provider, merged with the biggest ride-hailing company and listed recently. But they're moving into finance. They're moving to retail. They're moving to all these different areas as well. So anyway, there's just a few of the different options in the region.
Yeah, no, a quick follow-up. You distinguish between a good market like Singapore for B2B, and then you talked about B2C in other, I guess, more populous countries. And what seems to be changing is that those, it's not that those populations are going up drastically. I mean, they're going up, but it's the affluence that now accompanies that size of population. So is that something you've seen, and what does that mean for the sort of appetite for premium products, goods and services, those types of things? Is that progressing or elevating?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone in Southeast Asia has a smartphone. Let's face that. They get the cheap Chinese ones for, $100. Yeah, you see in the middle income build. So generally in a lot of Southeast Asian countries, it used to be the ultra-rich and then the rest. And now that kind of middle bit's filling out. Yeah, and so those people are starting to move as well more into formal finance. So they're getting bank accounts, they're getting cards. More importantly, those countries with or without the support of the government are building national ID platforms. Now, if you have an ID platform, you can innovate on that. You can do digital onboarding. You can do a business which needs to be licensed and needs to understand their customer. Great, there's a digital ID platform. They're doing digital payment services. So now, literally, I've got a hotel in the middle of the jungle. My boys will order stuff off e-commerce and get it delivered, even in the middle of the jungle, within 3 days on their little smartphones using their mobile wallet. They don't have credit cards, which they top up at the local shop. And so it's really drastic, that kind of the bulge in the middle income and the maturity of that as well, and the different products. So now a good example is look at wealth products. We're starting to see wealth growing, actually investing in wealth a lot in Southeast Asia, mainly around physical objects, gold and property, but we are starting to see a lot more ETFs. We're starting to see a lot more pensions being sold as well.
Excellent, thank you. And Roy, to you, again, looking to paint a picture for businesses in the room. So people who think about, maybe the start of their journey looking at Southeast Asia. What have been some of your experiences and insights with regards to, venturing into Southeast Asia for business?
Yeah, I guess when you look at getting money or doing a raise, it does really come down to the relationships. You need to make sure you're aligned. There is a lot of wealth in Asia, a lot. And gracefully, there is wealth here. Obviously, WA is a little bit harder. We love our rocks, mining and oil and gas. And if you're in tech, unlucky, Sydney is probably going to be easier. But that's where Asia works really well. They get tech. They're not exactly, like Singapore is more mature as a country, but their tech's still quite old. It's quite behind if you compare it to Australia. And Australian tech gets a premium, as you would have seen with Atlassian, Canva. So Figma was the latest one. There's a lot of great tech that comes from Australia. So you get a premium for that value. Now, if you're in that early stage and you're pre-revenue, or you're not making money because you're investing it all, there is a lot of incentives, not only here in Australia and locally here in WA, but you can leverage also in Singapore, you can leverage in Malaysia. There's a lot of incentives. We can get both. Part of the issues when you're in I guess, Asia is you do need a local director. So you do need to have that trust that that person will run that business for you, because they will have to have ownership of 50% or greater of that entity that is over there. But again, you would structure it properly with your accountants, your lawyers, and that obviously incurs costs when you're in a startup. So sometimes it's just easier just to try work from here, because we are the gateway to Asia with the same time zone. Like, I always hate the fact that I've got to fly to Sydney and it takes me the same time to go to KL. And I'm going completely different country, right? And then I lose my 3 hours over in Sydney, which is a pain. So, you know, when you do look for money, there's a lot of people that can connect you, and there's a lot of family wealth here that also, you know, will be in Asia. So the thing I would say is make sure the values align first, because you can get a valuation of whatever you come up with as long as you can justify it, but that always comes with a catch, right? Like if you go for a high valuation and you don't actually produce the revenue or the targets you're going to do, you're going to get diluted heavy and you'll almost lose your business. And I've seen a lot of people, they went in hard, got super excited with the valuation, but they missed their targets and got stripped down to basically a couple of % on the business that they owned previously 100. Right? So you just got to be smart about how you raise, what you're raising. You know, I used to be the guy that goes, oh, I'll raise a little bit now and then I'll raise later. I regret that if I look back, because it held the business back. If you are growing, you got to invest. You got to raise more than you need. You really do, because too many opportunities come, and if you haven't got the cash, you can't dart left or right to take those opportunities. And it hurt us in the initial bit. Until I realised that, hey, a smaller percentage of a bigger pie is a lot better outcome, and is really hard to swallow in that first Series A when you're giving up the business for cash. And especially banks are not great, certainly not here in WA, at loaning money for tech companies, right? Because it's not a tangible asset, it's an intangible, really hard. And the first thing they always ask you is, are you putting your house up? So that's when you do need your fundraising through VCs, PEs, or family office. Yeah.
And how did you build your relationships in Asia, you know, outside of Perth? How did you start on that journey?
Always a hustler. So I always go to network events, but I'm pretty picky at the events I do go to. So usually the big four, because there's a lot of time wasters at those kind of events as well. But once you get to know people, and in my business, it was selling to other businesses. So you learnt a lot of founders, the C-suite. So that was my circle, that is my circle. And then they'll connect you into, once you build those trusts and relationships, they'll connect you into the right areas. Started off as simple as my accountant. Still my accountant today, you know, trust him with all the books and how he structured everything, but well connected in Asia. So when we wanted to start playing there, he was like, right, there's offerings here, funding, you got to structure it this way. And that's my word of advice, don't skip on your accountant or your lawyer, because they can save you a lot of money.
Okay, I'm sure that makes some people in the room very happy to hear that you're promoting that advice. Let's go online. Betty, I'm going to come to you. With Austrade playing this key role as the representative of Australian trade and investment in the region, can you paint a picture for us in terms of, you know, Australian businesses coming in, particularly coming into the landing pad? What's the profile of businesses, and, you know, what are they looking for, and what type of guidance do you give them?
Sure. Thanks very much, Lynn. Maybe I can draw back a step back first. So Landing Pad is funded 5 years ago in Singapore. At that time, it was quite different from how we operate now. It is literally the name of the brand, which is Landing Pad. It's a co-working space where you come in, take a hot desk in a co-working space where we provide you with local connections and some entrepreneur in residence to support you, probably some corporate secretaries services as well. But during the COVID, we have moved the program completely virtually, and even current post-pandemic, the program has been continued with combination of virtual and physical. So in general, what we do in Landing Pad is that we primarily run the program in collaboration with other accelerators or incubators. For example, in the past 1 year, we ran program with the IAG Firemark in the InsurTech, and with Grow in Asia for food tech, and MedTech Actuator for health tech, and with Visa on deep tech as well. So, and besides of that, those are just, so what we collaborate with the accelerator by sharing our local contacts on top of the accelerator could provide. And on top of that, we also provide in-market event support. So for example, like in this year, in June, we worked collaboratively with InsurTech Australia to support 9 Australian fintechs to come to Singapore for the InsurTech Connect Asia conference. And also, most recently, we supported 36 Australian fintechs and 81 founders in Singapore for the Singapore FinTech Festival. And all of those are events that we run not only just to attend for the conference, but we will provide on-site programs depends on the company's needs. For example, companies currently raise money in Singapore. We will do roundtables with companies together with a few identified VC partners in the roundtable to have a chat on what it takes to fundraise in Singapore, and as a sounding board for them to modify their pitch, their value proposition, and form a strategy to raise money in Singapore. And so far, since we launched that service, we have helped the Australian company to raise over $7 million in Singapore. And besides of that, our Austria's bread and butter has always been helping companies to have soft landing in Singapore, which means that we help you to connect with the local business partners who could be system integrators, delivery partners, but most importantly, we help you to identify your target audience and to make that meaningful connections to have proof of concept project or have trial project with the target companies. So that's in a nutshell of how we run the landing pad in Singapore.
Excellent, thank you. And we should acknowledge just how sizable Austrade's footprint is, not just in Singapore, but across all of ASEAN. I think it's something around 100 staff. Would that be correct in market?
Yes, roughly around that size. Yes, we have offices around every single country in ASEAN, except Brunei. Brunei is taken care of by Thailand. And for example, in Indonesia, we have a few offices. We have in Jakarta, Surabaya, and there's another one. So basically all the major cities in ASEAN, we have offices.
Okay. And so just in terms of advice for businesses when they come in to into the region, I mean, what advice do you have for them to prepare for their journey into Southeast Asia? Any mistakes that they sometimes need to address before, that they might make that they should have addressed before they come, or any sort of guidance you'd give them as they start to explore?
Certainly, yeah. Before joining Austrade, I was a fintech founder myself as well. Although I've been giving so many advice to others in the past, but I can see that all the mistakes that I've given to others, I've taken the same mistake. So, and in terms of coming to Asia, I guess the first thing is that you have to be really, really prepared in terms of the competition, especially in Singapore. Everybody thinks Singapore is a soft landing for Australian companies because of the similarity of the regulatory perspective, as well as the nature of the consumers. But Singapore market is also very spoiled in terms of the offering, because everybody thinks Singapore is a test bed before they come to ASEAN. Therefore, there are so many companies, not only from Australia, but around the region, as well as from UK and US, are in Singapore. So the market is extremely competitive. And also, it will be a lot easier if you have success stories in Australia. For example, big companies who have multiple branches in ASEAN as well, to reach out to them first before you reach out to the rest of the target audience that you wanted to reach to. But having said that, I have to say that Singapore is a great place to raise between pre-seed round to Series A. The reason behind is that Singapore has over 400 VC firms. For the past 2 years, we have seen also the increase of family offices. The official number is 700, but the word in the market is to close to 2,000 family offices in Singapore, and 200 over accelerators touch on different subsectors of the technology. So it is, and Singapore is basically a lot easier to raise the seed round money, and VCs were very happy to put in between 50K to 200K for you to trial your business ideas in Singapore before moving on to the rest of the ASEAN.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to pose a fairly similar question to you, and that's about how should Australian businesses prepare when they're coming into market looking for funding? How should they prepare their business, their presentation, and for meetings with investors?
Thank you. I think one of the key things that they really need to focus on is defining the desired customer experience. Really making sure that they've done those customer interviews and they've reanalyzed what the product, the price, the package, the transaction, the access, and the support looks like, and which components of that they're going to deliver, and which components of that they're going to rely on partners to deliver, and then what programs they're going to need to invest in to run that out at scale. I think the second thing that is always a challenge for founders coming into market is capital. Don't come to Singapore without any money. People come to the market starving and expect that they will be fed. And without any substance in the region, it's very unlikely that people will give you money. Yes, someone might cut you 200,000, but they're also likely to take your shoes off with that money as well. And so if you actually want to retain ownership of your business, I would argue that you would do that pre-seed round at home and only come into the region once you have a customer in market and you are capable of truly defining that desired customer experience and the problem that you're going to solve. The other issue is I see many Australian companies look to put a square peg in a round hole without that product market adaptation piece done. Naturally, all of these countries speak different languages. So if you just start right there, that's one inherent change in somebody's product or platform that they're going to need to deliver, not only the service that goes with that. And that in itself, for many Australian companies, is a huge hurdle, especially if they're not yet capitalized. And finally, I would say that not all capital is made equal. Australians are quite naive when it comes to understanding sources of wealth. And just to share as a fundraiser on the venture capital side, my first 3 offers of capital, the first was 5 families laundering Chinese money through a Luxembourg-listed ESG ETF. The second was a Swiss family office who are actually Bulgarian arms dealers, 3rd generation. And my third was a Bitcoin millionaire who thought that he could harass my team for his 2.5 million. That was my first 3. So I have to encourage every single person in the room to really do their homework on the capital that comes to the company. Quite often a founder will come into market, they'll say they're raising 500. Someone in the market will come up to them and say, oh, you're raising 500? No problem, let me give you 1 million. And all I need is a credit card so that I can sit on your board and open doors for you. But it's very likely that you've just become a money laundering machine for trapped capital. The other issue that founders often have is very established executives in market. They come in as angel investors. They say, we're going to rally the checks that you need to give you that $1 million that you need to come into the region. They're wonderful investors for the first 3 months. They're more challenging investors for the next 3 months. And before you know it, you've hit the end of the year. You've only got 2 or 3 transactions, but they're saying that they need audited financial accounts, or they're going to threaten you with a claim on fraud unless you pay them out at 10x the amount of money. And so these are all the kind of hustles that take place in market, and you've really got to be switched on. I love what was said earlier, to make sure you've got the right accountant and law firm. That will be absolutely the first gatekeeper to making sure you've got the right capital sitting at the table.
Thank you. If I can go back to, you did a good job of outlining some real pitfalls, I think, in the second half of your answer. If I go back to the first half of your answer and looking at how a business would really sharpen its presentation for investors. I mean, how do you make sure that you're profiling to investors in the right way? And what is it that investors really want to see, say, from, in this case, a business coming out of Australia?
Yeah, we have a 6-pronged VC acid test, and it's pretty basic. Number one is, are you solving the right problem? And what we mean by that is your solution oxygen? That is, we can't live without it. Is it aspirin? That is, you solve the headache. Or is it jewelry? That is, you give me bragging rights at my local family office. Hopefully you're all three. But make sure that you're actually solving the root cause of the problem, not the symptoms. And to do that, you need to ask yourself the 5 whys, and you'll usually get to the root cause in the 4th and the 5th why when examining the problem that you're solving. The second is the market size. Now look across Southeast Asia, 620 million people. It's a pretty big market. But really, for that problem that you're specifically solving, what is the real market size? And is it big enough in order to warrant a scalable business? The third is, what is the defensibility? Are you able to build a data moat or put an IP asset behind this company so that we've got downside risk protection for us both? You, in terms of building a sustainable long-term going concern and having defensibility from your competition, and us, because if the business fails, we can exit the asset. And then the fourth element is, what is the quality of your team, and have you worked together before? And demonstrate to us that you're cohesive. We use a tool called Fingerprint for Success, which is a Sydney-born company, to really understand whether or not you're a founder capable of building and exiting a company valued between 6 million and 1.2 billion, or whether or not you're capable as a founding team to scale a company 10 years or more, or whether or not you really shouldn't be an entrepreneur at all. And then the next 2 elements we look at is the quality of your advisory team. So if you don't already have a board of advisors established, I encourage you to do so, and to have a board of advisors that reflects the missing elements that are not existing today in your founding team, and ideally some competency and capability that reflect the markets that you want to go into. And finally, we're looking for that hockey stick. Where are you going to get the growth in this business that is going to give us that return? Remember, a venture capital firm is generally a 10-year going concern, of which we have a 3 to 5 year investment period. Make sure when you meet your investors that you're meeting them early in that investment cycle. That's really important for you to get the support that you need in order to support you as you go into that next round. And also try to make sure that you diversify that capital pool and you have more than one investor coming into that round. So if one investor doesn't top up, it doesn't send a bad signal to the market that there is someone on that initial round that is going to be representative in the ongoing rounds. So making sure that your cap table is ready and fit for venture capital is fundamental. But you might not need venture capital, especially if you're an IP-backed company that is going to be illiquid for quite some time. Perhaps you have some regulatory hurdles that you need to get over in region. Perhaps you need to do some clinical studies. I encourage you to think about other types of capital that might serve you better. For example, getting access to foundation or endowment grants if you need to do a clinical study. Perhaps you want revenue-based financing or venture debt if you don't actually need venture equity-based financing. I'm a huge believer in family offices because they not only bring patient, long-term generational capital, but they also often have a philanthropy arm that can fill that missing middle where your grants have run out and the venture capital can't come in. So think very deeply, not only about the cap table that you have that exists today, making sure it's clean and ready for investment, but also make sure you're choosing the right type of investment as well.
Great, thank you so much, Lisa. And Tin, over to you. You know, the combination of digital and climate change sounds like it's at the sweet spot of some converging global trends. Can you paint a picture for how much interest there is in what you're doing, and also, again, advice for Australian businesses that might be relevant to your fund?
Yeah, actually, what we recognize currently, like I just say that, which is there's some type of investment in terms of actually some markets that we can choose the investee that we invest in terms of climate tech, and we realize that's the a kind of two option. The first one is that from the developed country like European countries or American. They got the different approach in terms of climate tech. The thing is more, like I say, heavy, like more into deep tech, like plasma energy, for example, or some robotic solution, things like that. The second option is that jump into the frontliner countries, like they got bad effects of climate change. Their solution maybe not really deep tech yet, but they got enough potential in terms of the market to test. So it's turned out that we can realize that in those countries, especially in Southeast Asian country, we realize that the chance to get engaged with the market is much faster than developed country like American or European country. So we realize that there's some strengths that Australian startup provide. The fact is that machine learning, AI, and also the data mining is something that we really look at in terms of the Australian startup ecosystem. But the weaknesses, which is the first one, is that the cost to run the team in Australia is much higher than how we run it in Southeast Asian country. When we have a chat with some team, it's like roughly, it's a good team, roughly 2 million to 3 million per year for their operation. Where we can run some kind of similar team in Vietnam or Indonesia with maybe half of that budget. So it's turned out that the cost for the team is something that we need to consider in terms of establish a team in Australia. Some solution, maybe we run parallel team. So it's like the tech team can base in Southeast Asian country, and the business team, if the product can apply for Australia, for example, they can base in Perth, for example. So that's something that I can recognize, and there is some thing that I can share if I may share. You can see my screen, which is some trends in terms of climate tech investment in Southeast Asia. First of all, we observe that it's a hardware light and early stage solution. So it's like for country like Vietnam or Indonesia, people more focused, actually startup more focused on software, not hardware. But now when we look at some deals in Israel, for example, it's a combination of hardware and software, IoT, Internet of Things. And we see that the trend of mainstream activities, now climate tech is not CSR anymore, it's the mainstream activity, and more companies get involved in that as a mainstream. And we can see that there's some trend here also, which is tackle with the regional issue and then with the global approaches. It's something that we see from the successful startup in the region. And we can see that the valuation is less crazy than before. Just 2 years ago, we can approach a seed company in Indonesia, but the pre-money valuation is around 100 million. So it's crazy like that. But now everything is cooler, it's lower down, and it's get into the real valuation that we can see now. And we got more commitment from the oil money. from the Middle East, from Brunei government, from the government that live on the oil money, but now they tend to invest more in renewable energy. So it's like a trend. But we lack of understanding, researchers, and also initiative in terms of climate change. It's something that I believe that Australian startup and also the education in Australia can bring to the region, can bring to the Southeast Asian region with understanding and scientific research. We can go more deeply into Vietnam. I go very quickly into some point here, which is the large population, nearly 100 million people now, and the median age is just like 32. So it's like very young one, and the adoption and economics alliances. I think we got some alliances with Australia also. And what I want to highlight here, which is the technology talents, which is that every year we got like 50,000 graduated from university around. And look at the average salary, it's just 1.3 thousand per month. So it's turned out that you can pay for a lot of engineers available in the market, and with high quality actually, because nowadays most technological company in Vietnam focus more in product. It's not like outsourcing before. Now it's not the time for outsourcing company, and now it's more about product. And we can also see some number, which is we got 3,000 tech firms, and hopefully we got 1.5 million SME in 2050 in the country. And it's also available for investment, because for now it's got like roughly 100 VC focused on Vietnam. But the committed investment, committed AUM, which is like 1.4 billion, which is very tiny. And we can look at this. So it's like available for people to jump in, for more companies, more investor and also startup to jump into the market.
Thanks,
And
Tien.
some hints
Sorry,
here,
Tien. We better bring it back to the room. We're going to run out of time if we start doing a slide presentation.
Okay.
So,
if you may want more data or something like that for a startup, I believe that more valuation or something I can share more later.
Great, thank you so much for that. And we'll have all of your details available if anyone wants to follow up individually. I am keen to check if there's any interest from the room in terms of questions for any of our panellists. We do have a microphone available if anyone wants to ask a question. Can you just raise your hand, tell us who you are, and then also who your question's for. Do you have any questions? We've got one over here, Lindsay.
For all the, sorry, my name is Andrew from 4Blue. We focus on ocean innovation. I'm curious for any of the speakers really where you see a particular fit between, say, Australian expertise or a particular sector or industry we are strong in, and where there is a really huge demand or need in an Asian country in general. There's certainly, I'm aware of some sort of in the ocean space where we have a lot of expertise and there's huge demand, say, in ocean plastic pollution prevention or circular economy, deep technology, but I'm curious about what others there might be.
Who'd like to take that question?
My observation, just one industry, is farming. Australia obviously is a big part of our GDP, the exporting. But one thing, my brother does live exporting out of Australia and into Brunei and KL. But Malaysia has a big problem in breeding. And that's why they have to always rely on, I guess Australia to bring the stock in there, or Indonesia, and the different qualities. And it was just fascinating being over there last couple of weeks and just to see the real problem that we just take for granted, that everyone's a farmer once you're 50 k's out from Perth. It's really, really interesting.
I suppose from my industry, fintech, finance, I do see a lot of Australians in project management. I don't know why. Wherever you go in Southeast Asia, if you go to any size company, there'll be an Australian person running Agile. So certainly an export for the tools, but fintech's a massive one. I suppose the poster child for this is Jamie Camage. So Jamie was from the East Coast. He moved to Indonesia. He set up a startup called Forex, Empat Kali, which is basically a buy now, pay later solution like Afterpay, yeah? I think it took him 4 years. He turned it into something significant and actually got acquired by Afterpay. So Afterpay came and bought his business in Indonesia, and he just arrived back to Australia last week. So he spent 4 years in Indonesia, built a hugely successful business, got an exit, and now back in Australia. I would imagine a very, very wealthy man. And sometimes it's not about the skill. Sometimes what's lacking in Southeast Asia is leadership. Yeah, and I can say that, you know, someone who can be a leader, tell people what to do, get them organized, get them going. So that is an export as well, where there is a distinct less leadership availability in some of the countries. Depends which ones. But they are looking for people, if you want to go there and work in their local startup community. There's a huge amount of expats in there. So maybe you're not doing a startup today, but you want to learn the ropes. There's lots of jobs available in those kind of leadership positions in these organizations because they need someone with that that certain characteristic. If you look at countries like Indonesia, Philippines, even people find it very difficult to give feedback, to give strong feedback, and that kind of very direct management. And Australia does fit that role quite well. So I'd say as a kind of general export, there's a lot of leaders from Australia up there making stuff happen.
Yeah, there's a really interesting footprint of Australian digital classifieds firms, investment into Southeast Asia as well. I mean, the guys at Seek and realestate.com.au have really pushed into Southeast Asia. So where businesses have set up almost models that are interested, akin to Australia. So you talk about Afterpay and something that's similar to, and then how that's just, as long as they've built it with almost the acquirer in mind, it seems to then find a good alignment going forward. Any other questions from the room? We have 2 questions, so we'll take the one in front, and then we'll come to the back of the room to that gentleman there.
Hello, I'm Patty from Hyperfire. We're an early network detection cybersecurity firm. So we're now looking to expand into Asian region, but one of the things that we've been thinking about is going to a lot of, for example, conventions or conferences to meet and network with businesses who are interested in us. However, you mentioned before that there was perhaps beachheaders, which might be another option to go in towards. In your experience, do you think it's worth a business to visit multiple cities within a year to network and gain those connections, or is it better to work with an expat within those cities to profit better and make those connections since they have the culture and the understanding already?
Yeah, I mean, you're a B2B. I'd imagine you're selling to who? Large companies or telcos?
Yes, critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I'd rent a coin-operated salesperson. So get someone either expat or local who you have to pay a huge amount of money to, commission for the deals and get them in there, because it could take you 5 years to get to a place that someone can get you into 6 months.
Okay.
So, but they need some significant incentive to do that, whether that's through equity, whether that's overpaying them on commission for the first deal. Doesn't have to be expat. I just gave you an expat example. There's lots of very powerful locals in there, but just be very careful who you get into bed with. I like some of Lisa's stories. There's, and I think I've seen quite a few things in Southeast Asia, but ending up being a money laundering company actually sounds quite profitable. But shouldn't say that. I'm a regulated entity. But yeah, that will get you there a lot quicker. Also, look at all the free stuff, all the free community, the startup events, the government kind of platforms they have. Singapore have loads and loads of different government incentives and platforms where you can meet people. You've got to work it. You've really got to. I would pick your markets though. Before you go, just do a search in Google. Just rate each market and literally rank them, and you can measure it on size of market. The closeness to your current customer base in terms of culture. You can potential market size. and then just be very scientific and go to that one first, then to that one. Because the cultures are vastly different, I'm sure, as you know. Yeah? When you move something from one country to another, it's not just a language change. There's a whole different change. So don't assume as well that you're going to scale easy across Southeast Asia. The best way to do that is to get into the hubs. So get the corporations in Hong Kong and Singapore and KL and get distributed down through their country geographies. So if you can sell to HQ, that's why Singapore's good for B2B, then you can deploy in each of their countries where they have a presence. Or piggyback. So a system integrator might make money from deploying your product. You know, might be a big one or a small one.
Yeah, we're definitely already considering some of that in America, so
Yeah.
that's definitely possible in
Yeah.
Asia.
Did anyone online have a response to that question? Who wants
I
to
think
go?
Betty and I do. I'll hand over to you, Betty, first.
Thanks, Lisa. I would like to build on what Nell just said about engage with local people. It is certainly very highly recommended. I've been working with over 100 Singapore fintech companies for the past 1 year plus. Most of them are thinking of coming to Singapore. They fly in and out ever since the COVID restriction uplift. But the reality is it is so not effective. People want to see you face to face. People wanted to have constant discussion. And Singapore is such a great place where a lot of things is happening, like events, gatherings, and you really need to know the people here. Singapore is a small country, it's also a small ecosystem. People roughly knows each other, or they heard of each other, or they know the people who know somebody. So you really need to be in the market to start to build your network. And the network is two prongs. One is to identify the potential target audience that you would like to sell to. The other one is probably in the networking, you could identify some people who could represent your companies in the future as well. I've seen a few Australian companies through the network have decided to headhunt the company, to the person that they've been talking to join the company later on.
Okay.
I'll now pass it to Lisa.
Yeah, I'm going to give my typical cynical view, if I may. I sit on the board of a cybersecurity critical infrastructure protection company out of Israel. We are living in complex geopolitical times, and we are building geopolitical risk scorecards for our founders to navigate. There is a great decoupling from China at this moment. And there is a necessity for you to make a call as to where you're going to play. So are you going to play Five Eyes on critical infrastructure protection? Are you going to play 9 Eyes, 14 Eyes? Or are you going to take Chinese funding? China is a huge market. There is absolute advantages. But the question is, do you really believe that you will be able to effectively sell into critical infrastructure in China as an Australian cybersecurity company? I think everybody in the room knows the answer to that. So I would encourage you to be extremely pragmatic. There is a reason why Israeli companies go direct to the US, and that is the size of the market and the margins of the US market. But I would also like to encourage you to think bigger. There is 95 billion euros in non-dilutive money in the European market that is currently being invested to improve European capability in technology. We have a fund set up by NATO of more than €1 billion. Every single government in every country is investing in dual use case assets. And there's a reason why I'm based in Luxembourg, and that is because I have uncapped non-dilutive capital available to my Australian founders. So now when we land our companies, we take them out of Asia, we land them into Europe, we pump them full of substance and government capability, and then we export them to the US market. Otherwise, it's a very expensive landing. So something for you to reflect on: where is your capital going to come from in terms of growth capital? And are you able to raise that in advance of going to the US? Or do you need to harden your product prior to landing? And if you need to harden your product prior to landing, Europe might be a better stop before the US, and then you can come back to Asia after that. That tends to be the path for cyber companies at this moment in critical infrastructure.
Thank you. And a final question at the back.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Walter Purio. I'm the chairman of RiseX, here, founded here in Perth. I have a question, and it's interesting for me, and I think the professionals and the experts online and on the stage. Now, our company was successfully raised just shy of 3 million US within the last five, 6 months. We went to 100 companies here in Australia. We are post-revenue. We are profitable. We didn't get a look in. And we got known, which is, I guess, the good side. But we ended up having to go to one of our clients, our customers, and they ended up believing in us and supporting us. Now, the question that I have for those of you that are listening, of course, all of you, all 5 of you, is why does it seem that Australians, and by the way, I have an American accent, but I'm a proud Australian, just to know that you have to leave Australia and go to the United States or go to Europe to establish yourself, which we have done and are doing, in order to come back with that, oh, that's great, you guys did a great job up there, thanks for coming home. Why is that? And what can change?
So who'd like to take that one? It's talking about the nature of the market here versus everywhere
I'm not
else.
Australian. I mean, is that applicable to every country in the world? Is, wherever you grow up, do you have to go play the away game and then come back, the returning hero, before you get taken seriously? I actually find Australia the opposite. They discount any Asian success, which I find hilarious. I talk to people here and, I had this idea of getting a job in Perth, stupid idea. Anyway, so, I went for an interview and I was just shocked on how they discounted my experience. Oh yeah, but that's Singapore, you don't understand, it's different here. Okay, so, I work for the biggest company in Southeast Asia, helming innovation on annual budgets of $25 million a year, and this little job down here in Perth. So you get that as well. But I think it's very difficult to raise money here in Perth. It's a nightmare. Yeah, I've been through it as Picture Wealth. We've raised, 30 million over the last 5 years. A lot of that from family office, private equity, wealthy individuals here. There just isn't the depth of the market. I think the thing here is Perth has a certain mentality, no offense, which is a lovely place to live, lovely people, but it can be a little local in terms of that, aspect, especially when it comes to investing. If you're trying to do something really big and ambitious, sometimes you have to dial it back a bit and turn it into, stuff that people can see today and touch. But it's a market where people are used to investing in dirt, stuff that gets dug out of the ground. It's changing over time. They get a lot more sophisticated. But the best money to go for, the closest place to here is Singapore. I wouldn't even go east. Why bother? I mean, really, you're going from one, smallish town to a slightly bigger town where you can just, go to Indonesia, how many have they got now? 250 million people, Philippines. You got Singapore, where I don't even know the size of their investment funds. I know the government fund's about $250 billion. So I think it might be natural that you have to go away to come back and prove yourself, but it is a very different investment market here. It's good as well. I mean, there's lots of local money if you can find these wealthy people and convince them that this startup is actually as good as investing as in gold or minerals.
Anyone online, a final comment on that question?
I wanted to say that I echo the experience, because even for before joining Austrade, as what I mentioned earlier, I set up a reg tech company. So we have to venture from Singapore into UK and have a success story in UK in order to raise money back in Singapore. But without knowing the gentleman's business, I guess the reason what way later analyzed is because RegTech is a cost business. We don't directly help the financial institution to generate revenue, but more than helping them to cut down costs. So that's a different side of the business. If you could help companies to generate more revenues, it's a lot easier to raise locally.
Tien, can I give the final word to you because you've been very patient?
Yeah, I think it's all about the problem that we try to solve, right? And if we come to another market, it's trying to prove that we got scalability. And with the hockey stick growth, I believe that scalability is really important. And even though we just start from the very local issue, but I do hope that the startup can go global, at least regional, so that it's bring more value to the customer. It's the main idea. I think those value, will attract more investment, and everything is after those value. So it just test the markets as possible, much markets as possible.
Excellent. Look, thank you everyone. On that note, I'm going to wrap up the official proceedings. Would you all please give a round of applause to our speakers today?